Sup guys, Josh here, back for another video, just by myself this time. It is officially now 2025, and with that in mind, it only felt right to roll back to 2024 and to take a look at the great year that was 2024 in the UFC and MMA as a whole. Admittedly, I said this on the show before, not my favorite year, but still a lot of great highlights. And so we're going to go back and look at every UFC pay-per-view that happened in 2024, and we're going to rank all 14 of them. Other people have done this, but I feel like I had to throw in my 2 cents on the subject, and the criteria for this is, there is none. It's just, really, it's just my own personal enjoyment and what I found fun this year. And we're going to kick this off with definitely a hot take. This is a pay-per-view that not a lot of people have put near the bottom, but I feel like I had to do it here. This is just my own personal take. UFC 304 in July, going down in Manchester from the UK, headlined by Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2. Was this card bad? No, it wasn't terrible. Obviously, we had a couple of bangers on here. The co-main event, Tom Aspinall, Tommy, getting the knockout win in the first round over Curtis Blades. Incredible performance. Paddy Pimblett having a breakout performance against King Bobby Green. Love to see it. And the British crowd early on in the night, they were hyped, man. Obviously, I mean, they get like 1 to 2 shows a year. This is a pay-per-view. Huge fights on it. They're going to be hyped up. The bad news, in case the fans didn't know, the UFC hates you. You're not Abu Dhabi. You're not Saudi Arabia. They're not going to start it at a time that's good for you. The main card got started, I believe, at like 3 a.m. in the UK. So by the main event, these dudes are drained. The people in the crowd do not, I don't want to say they don't care, but they are understandably just completely drained from being up at 6 a.m. in the morning watching Belal Muhammad. The main event was pretty bad. There were many decisions on the night as a whole. It felt like as the night went on, the fighters themselves were like, damn, dude, why am I fighting at 4 a.m., dog? Like, why couldn't this happen at a good time? They were tired. The fans were tired. There wasn't a lot of star power beyond the main and the co-main. I mean, it has to be the worst pay-per-view of the year. Again, not terrible, and there were a couple of big bright spots, but whenever you have a card, like, dude, imagine being a fan in Manchester that stayed up till 6 a.m. to watch Belal Muhammad win UFC gold. Next up, UFC 297, kind of the inverse in a lot of ways to UFC 304. This one happening in January, happening in Canada. Whereas UFC 304 had a couple of undercard bangers and a couple of big knockouts, UFC 297 was kind of the opposite. The main event was a banger. Dricus du Plessis going back and forth with Sean Strickland for 25 minutes. It's one of those classic wars for 5 rounds where fans come out of it. There's arguments on both sides. Personally, I remember thinking that DDP did enough. But upon rewatch, I've given the fight to Sean Strickland. Regardless, man, it was a back and forth fight. Both guys came out of it looking like they had been through a car accident. And it's the type of stuff you want to see from a UFC title fight. The bad news, everything else basically. There were a couple of good fights on here. Neil Magny having a comeback for the ages, defeating Mike Malott. There were a couple of early prelim bangers on this one. But the card itself, a lot of ways similar to UFC 304. Not a lot of star power. A lot of just, And even the good things, like Neil Magny's insane comeback, that was more just Mike Malott shitting the bed. No offense to him. Finish on the main card coming with about like 15 seconds left says a lot about that main card. And yeah, man, in the same way that I felt bad for British fans, it's impossible to not feel bad for Canadian fans on this night in January. UFC 302 going down in June. Islam Makhachev taking on Dustin Poirier in the main event. Dude, I said it on our award show this past week. This was my fight of the year. It was basically movie type shit from Dustin Poirier. I mean, he says, a longtime fan favorite, going into the fight says, this might be my last fight. At the very least, this is totally my last title fight. So I'm going to let it all hang out. And that's exactly what he did. For 5 rounds, just giving it his all. And reminding fans why he's a Hall of Famer. You can't stay away from Islam Makhachev forever, man. In round 5, he gets the takedown. And ends up getting the submission win to retain the gold. And, man, just what a fight. and it's one of those fights that reminds you why you love MMA. The bad news, similar to the other cards I mentioned, almost everything else. A couple of other wars on here. Mickey Gall, Basil Hafez was like one of the most underrated fights of 2024. Those two dudes who, like, admittedly, Mickey Gall, I'm still shocked that he's still in the UFC at this point in his career. But still, putting on a war, and that was a fun fight. But the co-main event, Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa, just, I don't even know what to say about that fight. I mean, I rewatched this fight for this video, and it's like, dude, what the hell are you? Like, I think Luke Rockhold said that Sean Strickland fights like he's a nutcracker, and I think that's the perfect way to go ahead and say it. This is a hot take. People are gonna hate on me. It's fine. It is what it is. I'm not worried. UFC 306 / Noche UFC / Riyadh Season Noche UFC / Peter Jackson's King Kong official game of the movie. Whatever. Okay, longest titles of all time for a pay-per-view that had a lot of hype that did not live up to it. I'll say this. I did not attend the Las Vegas Sphere. If I was there, I'd have a much different opinion on this card. Instead, I watched it at home, and it was okay. Like, I could see, like, if I were in the building, all those fighter presentations that they had kind of in between the fights would have meant a lot more to me. And I liked him. Let me be clear. Like, I liked him a lot. But it wasn't anything that was overwhelming to me. And as far as the fights themselves, there were some bangers. I'm not going to lie with you. Several great performances. Diego Lopez, Joshua Van coming through his kind of breakout party. You had a fight of the year contender, Ribovic versus Zellhuber. The bad news is that it didn't really live up to the hype outside of a few fights here and there. Specifically, the main and the co-main. Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili and Valentin Shevchenko versus ELYXR Grasso 3. Neither fight really lived up to the hype. Both of them kind of played out in a very similar way. A lot of dominance, a lot of ground positional control in the 50 minutes across the main and the co-main, and not a lot that actually happened. It's impossible for that to not factor in and just tank whatever hype they had from those early performances. Another hot take. This was a card that's been one of the lowest rated, according to most fans I've seen online. But I gotta show some praise to the boys down in Brazil. UFC 301, flyweights in the main event, an absolute banger. Steve Erceg, Astro Boy, coming through as a huge underdog and is essentially one bad decision away in round 5 from potentially being UFC champion right now. There was more than just the main event. The co-main event, Jose Aldo coming back and putting on an incredible performance. Anthony Smith coming through and handing Vitor Petrino his first major loss in UFC. Kyle Baraglio absolutely murdering Paul Craig. I mean, an awesome performance. The bad news and the reason why it is so low is obviously the lack of star power and the lack of intriguing fights as a whole. In 2024, if Anthony Smith is on your main card, you probably did something wrong. Even though he got a win here, I mean, at this stage, he shouldn't be fighting on main cards. I'm sorry. Next up, UFC 307 going down, home of the Mormons, Salt Lake City, Utah. Oh man, this card was a really makeshift event. Up until like about a month out, we did not have a main event. We needed Alex Bahia once again stepping up like the legend he is to face Khalil Roundtree in a fight that a lot of people were kind of like, oh man, like Roundtree ranked, I think, number 7 heading into the fight, really wasn't supposed to get a title shot. Through 2 rounds, Khalil Roundtree looking like, oh damn, like he kind of got the jump on him, man. He's looking like maybe he'll, oh, never mind. Alex Poatan Bahia is that guy. Round 3 comes storming back. Hurts him really bad. Round 4, and I see people say this, he went into flow state, man. I mean, he just could not miss at round 4. Gets a knockout win. One of the greatest fights of the year, but there was more than just that on UFC 307. You had Joaquin Buckley coming through and kind of staking his claim in the welterweight division with a knockout win over Wonderboy Thompson. Kayla Harrison coming through, getting her second win in the UFC and giving life to the deadest division in the history of dead divisions, women's bantamweight. The bad news, women's bantamweight did have a fight in the co-main event. And he gets a controversial win over Raquel Pennington. You have Mario Bautista go out there and essentially just... He admitted afterwards that he just wanted to hold Jose Aldo against the fence for 15 minutes. And I, just as an MMA fan, that tanks not only the entertainment value, that tanks my view in you as a fighter moving forward. Terrible fight. It was a terrible decision, and it really tanked UFC 307 for me. UFC 309, Madison Square Garden, New York City. John Jones, Stipe Miocic. Let's start off with the good. Couple of wars on this one. Charlie Olives picking up the win over Michael Chandler. The opening fight between Mauricio Duffy and James Liontop. Great performance from John Bones Jones, coming back after a year and a half off. Questions about whether or not he's still good. Questions about whether or not he still has it. Dominates Stipe Miocic. There were several great stoppages on here. Jim Miller, Ramiz Vermaj just flattening Mickey Gall. Marcin Tybura picking up a huge win. That being said, why did that main event even happen? I'm sorry. Whenever you have a fight headlining a card that everybody seems to agree, like, okay, this is a really dumb fight. This fight should not be happening. Stipe Miocic, obviously 42 years old heading into the fight, hadn't fought in 3.5 years. Embarrassing that he got a title shot. Embarrassing that John Jones fought him over Tom Aspinall. And overall, just disappointing. That fight didn't need to happen. Also on the main card, Bo Nickel, Paul Craig having a staring match for 15 minutes. Very disappointing. The pacing of the card was just kind of odd. And the decision to even have Bo Nickel on the main card was kind of like an one, you know. But I also have to throw this in there. Dude, I don't care about your politics. Good or bad. You know, Democrat, Republican, independent, I don't care, okay? We don't need a Trump cam, dude. Seriously. We don't need, after every single fight on UFC 309, they panned to Trump. And, like, I get it, dude. Like, his team admitted that, like, they attend UFC events because they want good press and they want to promote him and they know it's good for his political capital. But, dude, like, we don't have to we don't have to do some North Korea type shit and make, like, speeches after every fight from every fighter about how good Donald Trump is. Dude, it's too much. It's too much at this point. 2024, we saw multiple retiring fighters like Andrei Arlovski not get, like, time on the mic for their final fight after years in the company, but you can find 10 minutes in the broadcast to fit in. Oh, man, Donald Trump's coming into the building. We got to give him his UFC fighter walkout. Like, dude, what the fuck are we doing here? Last pay-per-view of the year, UFC 310, Alexander Pantoja taking on Kai Asakura. This card was so much fun, man. Just overall, this felt like just a kind of a get-in, get-out card for the UFC. This is the last card of the year. They kind of just they threw some good names on here, but not a lot in terms of star power. But the fights themselves delivered in the main event. Alexander Pantoja, Kai Asakura fighting in 2x speed, basically. These guys went out there, landed some huge shots. Pantoja took him down in the second, scored the sub win. Love to see it. The co-main event, though, the arrival of Ian Machado Gary, a guy that's been hated since he came into the UFC, reversing all the opinions about him in just 25 minutes against Shavkat Rakhmonov. An incredible fight, nearly won. There were other great finishes on the undercard from the likes of Michael Chiesa. Obviously, the cons are obvious here. There's a big lacking in star power. The fact that there was a terrible decision on the main card. Cyril Gane defeating Alexander Volkov in the rematch. Just terrible. The worst decision of 2024. And then, obviously, the biggest con, Chrome Grace's existence. And the fact that he fought on this main card. So, there you go. UFC 303. Alex Poatan-Pahets versus Yuri Prochazka. Number 2. Look, dude, this card... You can say this about a lot of UFC cards this year, but this was the most makeshift event of them all. Conor McGregor loomed over this whole event. He was supposed to find the main event against Michael Chandler, pulled out on 2 weeks' notice due to a broken toe. In stepped Alex Pereira with 2 broken toes to fight Yuri Prochazka and a rematch of their fight from the previous November, where it was kind of controversial whether or not Yuri got knocked down. There were some kind of questions. In the main event, Alex Pereira got rid of all those questions, dominates, gets a knockout win. Dane Ige stepping up on less than a day's notice to fight in the co-main event against Diego Lopez. Incredible fight. Happy for 50K Dan Ige. Hopefully he got more of his 50K. Being said, like I said, this is a very makeshift card. Anthony Smith again fighting on the main card against Roman Dolidze in a fight where both guys stepped up on very short notice. There were a couple other disappointing fights as well. Ian Machado Gary, MVP, I thought was kind of disappointing. But still, overall, a very fun night of fights. In second pay-per-view of the year, UFC 298, going down in February, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria, he arrived. He finally arrived, knocks out Alexander Volkanovski in the second round. Just an incredible, incredible win, and staked his claim as the best featherweight on the planet. That being said, there are other good things here. The co-main event was really fun. Robert the Reaper Whittaker defeating Paulo Costa, getting back on the right track. There are other great performances. This card wasn't overwhelming. There were a couple of fights. I'd say Ian Machado Gary making it in here as well for his fight with Jeff Neal, where a lot of circling, not a lot of action. But overall, man, I liked this card a lot. Next up is UFC 305, going down from Down Under Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. The main event, dude. A huge factor in why this placed so high. Dricus du Plessis just has plot armor. Doesn't matter whether he's down and out. I mean, he's getting pieced up through 3 rounds against Israel Adesanya. Hurt him in the 3rd. But then in round 4, Dricus just out of nowhere hurts Izzy, takes him down and gets a sub win. And it was very quick, almost anticlimactic by how fast it happened. But still a great performance for him. There were other great fights on here. KKF getting a knockout win over Steve Erceg. Carlos Prates arriving with a just murderous knockout win over Li Jingliang. And then one of the greatest fights of the year, Dan Hooker versus Mateus Gamrot. Just a back and forth war for 15 minutes. Dan Hooker gets an upset win and elevates himself to being back in the top echelon of lightweight contenders. Cons, not huge on star power, and also it sucks seeing Tai Tuivasa lose. That's basically it. All right, use 299. Here we go. It is the 2nd place, and Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera 2 headlining this event. This whole card just ruled, man. I mean, the main event was a bit lopsided, but there were still some good moments from Marlon Chito Vera. But for the most part, just a Sean O'Malley masterclass in his first title defense as champion. But there was way more than just that. The co-main event, Dustin the Diamond Poirier knocking out Benoit Saint-Denis, kind of just in what may be the final win of his career, turning back the clock against a younger man, against a guy that is on the rise, and just one of the greatest knockouts of the year. That being said, there were other great fights. Michael Venom Page facing Kevin Holland, dominating for 15 minutes. Love to see that from the former Bellator guy. Jack Della Maddalena, dude, gotta give it up to him. Down on the cards, heading into round 3 against Gilbert Burns. Gets up with just seconds left on the clock, and then a flying knee, and that's all it takes. Knockout win for JDM, and he arrived. Lastly, it's obvious. UFC 300. UFC 300. This card, a lot of people were like, will it live up to the hype? And for a few weeks there, it looks like it probably wouldn't. You know, we were looking like maybe not even having like a massive main event. We were looking like we may not have a main event at all. I mean, it took until the last month for them to announce that Alex Poatan-Pahea would face former champion Jamal Hill in the headliner. Obviously, one of 3 title fights, Weili Zhang taking on Yan Xiaonan, obviously, and then Max Bless Holloway taking on Justin Gaethje. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. All 3 fights lived up to the hype. Alex Pahea getting the first round knockout win. Weili Zhang winning by knockout, submission, and decision all on the same night. And then Max Holloway with the knockout of a lifetime against Justin Gaethje. The top 3 fights delivered in the absolute best fashion possible. Whenever that happens, it has to be a high-ranked card. But obviously, this is UFC 300. So there were other fights too, man. I mean, every single fight on this card basically delivered. There were incredible performances up and down. Even seeing the old guys like Jim Miller and Bobby Green put on a war. Cody No Love, Davison Figueiredo was a fun fight, man. Like, there were so many great performances on this night that it's impossible to put anything but UFC 300 at the number 1 spot. That being said, that's all for me. 2024 was I'd say a mixed year for MMA as a whole. Not the greatest year I've seen, far from the worst, but I can't wait for next year. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm at Josh Soundoff on Twitter, at Courtside Sound for all things relating to the show. Podcasts coming every single Friday, and I'll see you later.